Here with reaction, Florida Senator Marco Rubio is with us. Senator, great to have you back. You know, you're pointing out something that is deep and profound, and I think this poll echoes what you're saying here. The fact that they can't even allow the largest margin of victory in an Iowa caucus was 12.8%. That was Bob Dole in 1988. Here, Donald Trump wins by a whopping 30 points, and they can't even carry his speech. I don't even know what to say to that. What, their audience is going to melt if they hear him?
Yeah, it's not about bias anymore. There's always been liberal bias in the media. Human beings are biased. They're partisan. And they're not just partisan, like openly partisan. They are now extending that to not just attack Trump as a candidate, as a former president and future president, but also to attack the people who follow him. Just in the last 48 hours, we've had multiple people go on the air on other networks and talk about things like, well, in Iowa, the problem is these are all white Christians. Or their attitude about the followers of Trump is these are dumb, stupid, uneducated people that don't know any better, or worse, they're haters, they're bigots. And so it's what's really changed is not just the partisan tone of the coverage, but now this effort to say we're not going to carry his speech, we're not going to let you hear what he has to say. We'll interpret it and we'll put out the snippets we want you to hear, but we've made the decision to no longer carry it. You know, you put up my message a moment ago from what I put up on X. This is exactly how state-run media is used by authoritarian governments to delegitimize, to discredit, to basically make people believe that there is no alternative but to the regime and to their rule. And it's destroying the media in this country. No, it's why at this point, you know, no one believes anything they see or hear anymore.
You know, I declared media was dead in 2007. Boy, I had no idea how right I was. You know, you talked about, for example, the work, the things that you accomplished and achieved when Donald Trump was in the White House, expanding child tax credits, tough sanctions on regimes in Cuba, Venezuela. You know, now we have people showing up at our border, unvetted by Joe Biden, allowed into this country, you know, hundreds from Iran, hundreds from Syria, thousands from Egypt, thousands from Afghanistan, 12,000 from Russia, 26,000 from China. These are our top geopolitical foes. These are countries that have ties to terrorist groups. They get into this country unvetted. You know, what are the odds, you know, terrorist cells have been invited in unvetted by Joe Biden? I'd say they're pretty high.
Yeah, when you have 6, 7, 8 million people coming into a country all of a sudden within a 2-year period, a 3-year period, these are not, there's going to be some percentage of them that are going to come here and commit crimes or worse, acts of terrorism and the like. Look, we're in a mess. Okay, we now have 2 active wars going on in the world, both of which threaten to suck us in, and a potential third one in the Asia-Pacific region with Taiwan and China. We have a country where a growing number of Americans will tell you, a majority of Americans now say their standard of living is worse than their parents, and they no longer believe America is a country where everyone has a chance to get ahead. We have all of our major institutions, universities, our schools, the media, the healthcare experts, all of it's broken, all of it's lost its credibility, all because of their own actions. It's going to take some big actions, controversial actions, uncomfortable actions to get this thing right, and that starts at the border. It's not going to be easy to fix this border thing. We're going to have to do something about the fact that we have 5, 6, 7, 8 million people that have come in here over the last 3 years under Joe Biden. There's going to have to be deportations at a level we've never seen before. That's not anything we've ever done before, but we're going to have to. All this is going to be hard. And the one thing I know about Donald Trump is he's not going to let some special interests come in and stop it. He's not going to let bureaucrats stand in the way. And he's not going to care how much he's smeared in the mainstream media over it. He's going to get it done. I saw him do it. And we need that again. We're going to have to make some tough, uncomfortable choices. And Donald Trump is the person I know. He gets elected, he'll do these things.
You know, you say that, and you were once an opponent. He's a fierce opponent. I saw a side of him, and I've been seeing a side of him, and he's, you know, that maybe we haven't seen before. I thought he was very gracious in his speech in Iowa the other night towards his opponents. That's been a criticism of his. Now, in his defense, you know, there's never been a guy persecuted more than this guy, starting from the day that he came down the escalator with Melania, you know, immediately being, you know, called a racist, et cetera. Moving on to, can you imagine Donald Trump with the nuclear codes? It seems like the media is living back circa 2016, thinking that if they say democracy in peril enough, talk about January 6th ad nauseum, you know, say Trump is evil, that will win them the election. if Joe Biden can't point to a single policy success, doesn't that lose him the election? And do you even think Biden makes it to November?
Well, I think he intends to make it to November. He's going to be the nominee of the Democrats unless something dramatic happens here. But I'll say this, he has nothing to point to. What's he going to argue? That the economy's better off? That America's safer? That America's reputation is stronger in the world? That the border is secured? The only thing that they have to focus on is they talk about January 6th nonstop and that Trump somehow is going to become some sort of a dictator if he's elected. That's the only thing they have to run on. People aren't buying this stuff. You know, Trump was president once, and there weren't jail filled with political prisoners. There weren't mass executions or any of these ridiculous things that they talk about. At the end of the day, this is about the future of our country. And it is in a mess. And we have to fix it. And if we don't fix it, if we don't win this election, which is what I think you saw President Trump's message the other night is, look, there's still some elections. People can stay in. I'm not here to tell anybody to drop out. What I'm saying is, he's going to be the nominee of the Republican Party. He gives us the best chance to win, and he better win because he is the one that will fix this. If he doesn't fix this, I don't know if 4 years from now we'll be able to. That's how bad things have gotten, unfortunately.
$34 trillion in debt, Senator. I don't know how you get out of that. It's not going to be easy.
It'll be 40 by the time we're done with Biden. If he gets reelected.
$1 trillion a year to service the debt before you pay a penny in Social Security, defense, any program. Scary. Senator Rubio, great to have you as always. Thank you, sir. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.